Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, we're going to stitch a spiral, and this is a very interesting element that you can add to your work. I'm going to use some very beautiful yarn that I found in my favorite color, but you can use ribbon, trim, cording. You can even take fabric and twist it just to make something textured. We're not going to stitch through the yarn, we're going to stitch around it, and it's called a couching stitch. By using this stitch, you can almost make any shape that you want to tack down to your work. It adds a bit of dimension and a bit of texture depending on the yarn that you use. You can use any yarn, any thickness, any size. The couching stitch is very versatile that way because you're stitching around the piece, just tacking it down essentially. It makes a very versatile stitch that's very beautiful in your work. And the spiral is such a great shape with the rounded edges. And I'll show you my process for doing that. So here are two examples of the spirals that we're going to do in class, and we're going to use some wool roving. It's just some yarn that I purchased at the department store. Under the yarns, they have a beautiful selection now. So to do that, you'll need your marker. You can use any type of pen that will erase. This is a heat-sensitive one, so I can just take an iron and erase it when I'm done. To sketch out your spiral, and then you'll just tack it down with a little straight stitch. And it's called a couching stitch because it goes over the yarn. It doesn't go through the yarn. So the way we get started with that is by making our sketch of our spiral. So I like to just roughly outline the finished size that I want my spiral to be. And then from there, I can plan exactly how many turns I want that spiral to have. Because this is a thick wool yarn, I don't need that many to be really effective. But I like to just go over my shape repeatedly until I get the shape that I really like with my marker. So that works for me. I can even extend it just a little bit further. Now I like to start on the outside and work my way in, so I leave a little bit of overlap so that I can cut that roving off when I'm done. And I don't like to go too far ahead, so I'll take my pin and pin down one little section, just trying to gently hold it in place. I know that I only need it to go to about here, so I'll take my thread, which is just embroidery floss in a similar color, to start. Another good choice is the variegated embroidery floss, if you can find colors that you like, because it becomes very interesting as you couch it down. So I'm just going to take this roving, because it's nice and thick, and just twist it so I get to the end. And I'm going to come in with my needle through where I want the end of the spiral to be, and I'm just going to create a stitch, and I'm coming up through the backing fabric and then back down. I'm not going through the wool roving, I'm just tacking it down. And for the beginning and the end, I like to add 2 stitches side by side. That really helps to hold it in place. And again, I'm not going through the roving, I'm just going right on top of it. And however much tension and however tight I pull it, and that's the result I'll get. Because this particular yarn is very fluffy, it really cinches it, which is a very interesting design element. Now from there, I just choose the distance that I want my next stitch to be. So I'm just going to do about a finger length stitch of a distance. So again, I come up on the side of the roving, pull my thread, and then I'm going to come down on the other side. Again, not going through that roving. And I'll just pull it to whatever tension I want. And I'll continue this following the shape that I'm making. So again, I go about a finger length distance. I don't want to come up through the roving. And I'll create another stitch. And I take my time to get that arc really nice. And I can just continue all the way around. Now that pin is kind of in the way, but I'm just going to work around it. I'll have my needle and thread come up just to the side of it. And then right back down here. I'll remove the pin, and I'll just gently work this corner here. Because I've anchored it down so well, I don't need any more pins. So I'll just go another finger length distance, bring up my stitch, and bring it down. And continue this all the way around that spiral, rotating the piece that I'm working on. And again, just making those couching stitches. I'll speed the video up so that you can see the entire process, but it won't take as long as it takes me to stitch it. I really like this couching stitch. It allows you to stitch down a number of different fabric pieces and textile pieces, and in this case, this wool roving. Now, if I'm tacking them down, my stitches down too far apart, it's not a problem. I can go back in at the end and just add stitches just to make the placement a little more even. Again, I'm trying to follow my guide. If I come to a spot where I'm running out of thread, I'll just knot it off on the back, rethread my needle, and start again. When I come to the area where the turn starts to tighten, I'll even make my stitches just a little bit closer together. And that allows me to make a very interesting and beautiful curve. I just want to make sure that I always come up on one side of the yarn and go down on the other. And again, as I get to the center, it becomes a little tighter to work with. I can trim down my piece ahead of time if I need to. I'm just going to keep going as long as I can here, continuing all the way around. I'm really trying to get that interesting curve that makes the spiral so intriguing. Coming close to the end here, make my last few stitches, getting closer together. And then bringing it right into the end. Now once I get to the end, I know I'm going to have one more stitch to end it. So I'll make that stitch and then I'll double it just like we did in the beginning. And before I knot off my needle, I'm going to snip the spiral here just to see if I'm happy with the way that looks. I can add one more stitch just so that the end is a little more finished. And then I can knot it on the back. Now, if there are any spots where I have too much space between stitches, this is a good time to go in there and add additional stitches. So I'll add one right here. And then continue to go around my piece, just adding a stitch here and there. I can do this with a different color embroidery floss if I wanted a different look. Or if I'm happy with the way this looks, I can just continue with this same color. And I like that. I think it's a simple but effective piece. I'll come in here, add a few more stitches. And then see if I want to add a few more. I'm going to trim off the edge of the piece here, the spiral, and then I'll just trim off that edge. And there I have my stitched spiral. So that's how I stitch the spiral down to my work. Depending on the distance between the stitches, the color of the embroidery floss that you use, or multiple colors if you like, you can get a totally different effect. I showed some different examples using rainbow colored thread to tack down your couching, and the one I did in class today, which was all monotone, all the beautiful turquoises. Depending on the distance that you make your stitches and the amount of tension you add, you'll get a different effect, as well as depending on the yarn or the ribbon that you choose to stitch down. I hope you found this video helpful and you find that using spirals in your work is very enjoyable. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.